How did a single bullet change the world? How did the assassination of one man turn into a hell that swallowed over 20 million lives? On June 28, 1914, in the streets of Sarajevo, a gunshot rang out fired by a young Serbian named Gavrilo Princip. And the target? Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But Princip wasn't acting alone. He was a member of a secret organization known as the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist group that believed in uniting all Slavic peoples under one flag and expelling Austrian influence from the Balkans. The Black Hand wasn't just a small group. It was a network that planned, trained, and armed its members. Their goal was purely political, to strike at the heart of the empire and ignite a revolution. But they never imagined that their act, instead of uniting the Slavs, would plunge the entire world into a total war. The truth is, all of Europe was waiting for a spark. It was already a continent burning from within. Germany and Britain were locked in a fierce arms race. France was hungry for revenge after a previous defeat, and Russia saw itself as the protector of its Slavic brothers in Serbia. The alliances back then were ticking time bombs. Britain, France, and Russia on one side. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire on the other. Any small conflict was enough to blow everything up. But why did they expect a short war? Everyone believed that modern armies and advanced weapons would end any conflict quickly. And the public? Swept up in a wave of nationalism. Flags waving, crowds cheering, but the reality was very different. From the moment war was declared on Serbia, the dominoes began to fall. Austria attacks, Russia mobilize, Germany joins the battle, then France, then Britain, and soon, the entire world was dragged in. Even the colonies joined the game. Soldiers from India, from Africa, from the Arab world sent to fight and die in European trenches without even knowing why. And the question remains, was Europe in 1914 really that different from our world today? Or do the alliances still exist, just with new names and new trenches? And so, that bullet didn't just end the life of one man. It marked the beginning of a century of destruction, the echoes of which still haunt us to this day. August 1914. Soldiers promised each other victory celebrations by Christmas, but they would be buried in trenches they never left, except through death. When the war broke out, everyone thought it would last just a few months, but they were fatally wrong. On the Western Front, Europe turned into an open hell. Winding trenches stretched over 700 kilometers. There, the ugliest form of warfare in history was born. Soldiers lived among the corpses of their comrades, bullets whizzing overhead, and endless shellfire. The British lost 60,000 soldiers in a single day at the Somme, only to discover that the front lines hadn't moved an inch. Then came the weapon no one could see. April 1915. The wind carried something new, chlorine gas. Soldiers screamed blind, their lungs dissolving from within. Within weeks, everyone was using it. Even animals perished. On the Eastern Front, Russia fought a war just as bitter. Despite its massive armies, it suffered from weak weaponry, chaotic leadership, and growing unrest. With mounting losses, internal collapse followed in 1917. Russia, 3 million dead, starving population, and soldiers fleeing the front. February 1917 revolution. Tsar was overthrown and then executed with his family in a dark basement. Nicholas II, Tsar of Russia, had ruled since 1894, and ironically, he, the German Kaiser Wilhelm II, and King George V of Britain were all cousins related to Queen Victoria. But blood ties didn't stop them from tearing the world apart. Lenin arrives by train from Germany, and the Civil War ignites. The Bolsheviks sign a shocking separate peace with Germany. Meanwhile, in the West, the war expanded. 1917. Germany made two critical mistakes. They sank the Lusitania, 128 Americans dead, Then came the infamous Zimmerman telegram, urging Mexico to attack the United States. President Wilson declared, "Enough. Things are out of control." Within months, 1 million American soldiers crossed the ocean. They shifted the balance of power, and the countdown to the end began. But the flames of war spread far beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, fighting the brutal Gallipoli campaign under Mustafa Kemal in a last stand to protect Istanbul. 1918. The great empires collapsed like dominoes. Austria-Hungary fragmented into 7 countries. The Ottomans lost their grip on the Middle East, and Germany surrendered, brought to its knees by revolution from within. But the peace was anything but fair. The harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles were a ticking time bomb, seeds of an even bloodier war waiting in the shadows. In muddy trenches, between the corpses of comrades and the screams of shells, soldiers wrote their final letters with frozen fingers. One of them wrote, "Mother, if you see blood on this paper, know that it's my tears, not my wound." This wasn't a war between nations. It was a human tragedy that turned people into numbers. Have you ever heard of the Christmas truce? Listen closely, my friend. On Christmas Eve 1914, the impossible happened. German soldiers lit candles on the edges of their trenches and began singing "Still Not." The British responded with "Silent Night" to the same melody. They exchanged cigarettes and chocolates and played football with an empty can. But in the morning, the commanders gave their orders: resume fighting. One survivor later wrote, "We knew that the man we shared bread with yesterday is the same one I would kill today." And what about the suffering of civilians? Behind the front lines, civilians lived a different kind of hell. In Germany, 750,000 people died of starvation due to the British blockade. Children chewed on shoe leather to trick their empty stomachs. In France, 40% of women were widows or orphans. Some worked in ammunition factories until their skin turned yellow from TNT. The war wasn't only on the battlefield, but at the empty dinner table too. Now we come to the most important point: the role of women after the war. When the war ended, millions of women refused to return to the kitchen. British women gained the right to vote in 1918. French women demanded equality in everything, even in wearing trousers. World War I was the first spark of the women's revolution, but its price was tears dried on the faces of mothers who lost their sons. Propaganda in 1914 invented methods we still see today. The American "I Want You" poster first appeared in this war. Newspapers published fake news like, "The Germans are boiling our soldiers alive." A myth. One officer even wrote, "Lying here is a weapon as strong as cannons." Do you remember weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? History repeats itself, and in the end, nothing remains of the war but rotten letters and fossilized boots in the mud. But its lessons are still alive. Every soldier had a mother who waited for him in vain. Every Christmas truce proves that humans can be better. If they choose to, perhaps that's the one lesson we've yet to learn. On the 11th of November, 1918, at exactly 2:45 o'clock in the morning, the gunfire ceased. The last shell went silent. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was more terrifying than the roar of the cannons. In the Compiègne forest of France, inside a humble railway carriage, Germany signed a humiliating surrender. The French commander, Ferdinand Foch, said coldly, "This is not peace. It's a truce for 20 years." As if he could already see what was coming. The German commander, Erich Ludendorff, wrote in his memoirs, "This peace will destroy Europe and open the gates of a new hell." And one of the soldiers who witnessed that humiliation would carry the hatred in his heart for decades to come. His name was Adolf Hitler. Now we arrive at the Treaty of Versailles, the wound that never healed. In 1919, In the Palace of Versailles, where the German Empire had once been declared, Germany was forced to sign a treaty that felt like a stab to national dignity. It was fined 132 billion gold marks, equivalent today to around $400 billion. It was forced to surrender 90% of its navy and lost 12% of its territory. Article 231 placed full responsibility for the war solely on Germany in open humiliation. The British economist John Maynard Keynes, who attended the conference, stormed out in anger. He later wrote his famous book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, warning, "This is not peace, it's a recipe for disaster." And just 14 years later, a man would rise to power, promising to tear that treaty apart. That man was Adolf Hitler. While the cannons fell silent, the victors began drawing new borders. But they didn't draw them with wisdom, they drew them with ink and blood. The First World War ended, but its tragedies did not. The great powers divided the world and planted the seeds of future conflicts. From those borders, disasters like the Nakba of Palestine were born. And today, Gaza bleeds under the same global silence. So, has anything really changed? Or is the war still ongoing in different forms?